All right. Welcome. Welcome to the transportation meeting. We're going to focus on the Chatham-Hudson route. I wonder if we all know each other. I'm not sure if we met Mike. So we'll just go around quickly and do intros for everybody. So Michael Schmid is chair of the transportation committee.
Rick Scudder, fifth ward.
Matt Morrell. Greg Simmons, supervisor of GAC.
PJ Keeler, treasurer.
Claire Purdy, I'm the director of the Healthcare Consortium.
Mike Johnston, Johnson Transportation.
Brenda Adams, Canyon supervisor.
Ron Hodge, Stuyvesant supervisor.
Denal Collins, Chatham.
Jim Bryant, controller.
Kelly, the clerk.
Kelly.
Kelly, the clerk.
That's the most understated.
Yeah.
All right.
We got history on from Lebanon.
Hi, guys.
So thanks all. I'm just going to give a brief sort of rundown of like what brought us to this moment, like where we've come from, to sort of set up the conversation about this, what I think is a likely route between Chatham and Hudson. So summer of last year, our assembly member and senator had reached out. They had secured $200,000 in funding to establish this new route between Chatham and Hudson. We were excited. It was something that we had been talking about. And so from that announcement, we had sort of started a planning process. So we had held discussions with between Chatham, Ghent, the Chatham mayor around what these systems would look like. We also talked about having an extension that would go all the way to New Lebanon, and sort of Brenda and Tister were involved with those conversations. Claire, as a leader in transportation for the county, has also been thinking about what this extension would look like, and Bob Gibson was sort of part of these planning processes. We issued a survey to residents. We got 278 responses, and about 40 people out of those responses said that they would be interested in riding once a month if there was service from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. So that sort of like showed that there was interest, and we felt like there was a lot of other interest that wasn't included in the survey. So we started moving forward, trying to figure those things out. One of the key pieces was talking to the state about how those funds would work. So it took us a while, but eventually we figured out that the funding was going through the Department of Transportation, and then the Department of Transportation sort of signified that they would, out of these funds, it would basically be 100% reimbursement. We would sort of spend the funds and then they would reimburse us. And they also described a system that seemed like reimbursement would sort of be widely incorporated of what would be reimbursable. So that could be operating expenses for our vendor, but it also could be capital expenses. It also could be things like printing or design brochures, and even like internal costs for staffing, as well as a portion of vehicles. So it sort of offered a pretty flexible way of getting reimbursed. The one piece that we were not sure about is whether or not, if we had this say a dial-a-ride system that extended to New Lebanon, they were sort of unclear whether that funding could be included. And there were sort of like two pieces to that, which was, one, would service to New Lebanon be included or not, because the description of the budget described Chatham and Hudson. And then the second piece was sort of, if the healthcare consortium was managing some kind of smaller vehicle fleet, what would be the DOT regs in order to sort of justify those funding? And we know that from Mike's work is that there's a lot of details in terms of meeting DOT standards that requires a lot of specialization. And it was sort of unclear how smaller vehicles would fit into that. And then the general sense was that Johnston's sort of capacity to add on New Lebanon, it sort of didn't work with this 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. So we would want to go with a secondary vendor to do this additional service. So we were sort of moving forward with those challenges when, I think it was in January, when DOT notified us that the budget, all the funds needed to be spent by March, which made the program sort of non-viable, because basically we were still sort of working out what would be reimbursable when they told us that we basically had 2 months to run the program, which just didn't make any sense. So then we entered into a new process of trying to get basically a 1-year extension, which would have to be reapproved into the budget, into this year's state budget. All signs point to that will be approved, in the sense that it's in the governor's draft budget. It's also in the Assembly and Senate budget. So it seems incredibly likely that we will get this extension. And then in which case a new clock will start from April 1st until March of 2026. So there's some advantage to being able to, the sooner we launch, the bigger window we will have to sort of try these funds and see and see how the program works. And then sort of like, if we don't spend all the funds, which I think we're unlikely to do, we could then ask for another extension sort of 6 months into the process. So that's sort of where we're at this moment. I guess the other couple things I can add is that we included the Chatham route as an option into our contract, which was ultimately awarded to Johnson Transportation. So we have sort of like DOT approval to move forward. We have a vendor who's able to do it. And then we have a draft route that we collaboratively created that we can also go over. And I also printed out, I sent over like a spreadsheet that has the routes, but I went ahead and made a map, which is a little confusing and complicated. We can go through. But so that's sort of, I think that's sort of the snapshot of where we're at. And again, because of the time nature, I want to be able to start as soon as we know that we have funding and that this process is approved by the state. I want to be able to launch as soon as possible. So I think the 3 agenda items that I want to focus on is that assuming we get state funding, I think we want to accept it and then move forward. Assuming that the state approves spending in this particular manner, I think we want to approve Johnston to sort of launch the service and use that state funding to pay for those services. And then 3 might be like, what are the adjustments or tweaks that we want to make to the service before it starts in order to do it as successfully as possible. So that's kind of like a snapshot of where we're at, and just trying to move quickly without too much stress over the next month to get this started.
So Mike, I'm a little confused. Did you
Yes.
say in the beginning that Mike wasn't able to accommodate that 9 to 2?
Oh, no, sorry. So 9 to 2 Mike can do.
Oh.
That works well for a Chatham to Hudson service, but sort of adding New Lebanon, like the distance from New Lebanon to Hudson, and to be able to go back and forth, sort of 9 to 2 is just too tight a window.
Mhm.
So like if the service that Johnston can provide 9 to 2 is good for Hudson to Chatham, but it's sort of not adequate for Hudson to New Lebanon.
Which is what we've got funding lined up for now anyway, right?
That's correct, yes.
If we just stay with that and try it.
Right, so the things that we were exploring in parallel was that if we had the Hudson to Chatham funding, there's interest in having people from New Lebanon or Canaan be able to connect to that Chatham service, and that would potentially save costs on the DSS side for people who are sort of needing to get for DSS services, or people just to get to Chatham to do grocery shopping. So if we had the Chatham to Hudson service, there's like an advantage to having this connecting service from New Lebanon to Chatham, and potentially we could use some of this $200,000 to pay for that. It's unclear, but we are not planning on doing that with Johnston because it's sort of outside the scope of what you can provide. That's understanding. Are you following, PJ?
Yes, thank you.
We've met with Bob Gibson, and he was gonna arrange the day that we choose, or we choose his day, to make sure services were available for these people on this run. So there's been a lot of work that Michael's put in. I appreciate it. Thank you.
And I think, we also think that the Chatham to New Lebanon loop would add capacity, ridership, significantly increase the ridership when we get there.
Yes.
He pointed out some cost savings if we were able to get folks down versus sending all the vans and the cars around. So if it works that way, it could be a win-win.
Just so you know, the travel lodge in Canaan is being proposed to move to the Galvan model that we have here in, is it Greenport or Hudson? Greenport. And that capacity right there, capacity there alone is around 40 people on a regular basis. Yes.
Better bust
They're out
separately
now,
now.
everybody's going out there, all the social workers, caseworkers are going out individually to visit to provide services. And it's not just Bob's agency, there are other agencies that are involved as well. So we think we could really start to reduce our the number of vehicles, our carbon footprint. And also give them some more independence. They could go to the pharmacy, to the food shop, or to the playground or the library, instead of just being out there on that hilltop by themselves. When we get there.
So this is 1 day a week, a 5-hour run?
2 days a week, Tuesdays and Fridays.
Oh, Tuesdays and Fridays.
Where's the starting point?
Yeah, so I can walk you through the map. So it would start at Depot Square in Chatham. And basically this like, the lighter scale, it's different color, like, so it would start at Depot Square, sort of do this loop around School Street and then a loop to Payne, High Point, Price Chopper, Ghent, down 66 into Hudson. And then basically does a loop around Hudson, hitting DSS, and then like goes up Fairview, the Walmart, and then returns on Fairview back to 7th Street Park, doesn't do that loop on the left-hand side, and then returns back up to Chatham. And then when it returns to Chatham, it doesn't go to Payne and Chatham Manor. And then it basically repeats the whole thing one more time. And then so it finishes it. And it would finish in Hudson at around just before 2 o'clock. So the idea would be that if you can get to Depot Square, Chatham Manor, or Payne early in the morning, or High Point, those people come to Hudson or Greenport. If you're in Hudson and you're trying to go to Chatham, you could then like catch that bus at say around 10 o'clock back to Chatham. And then it would return back to Hudson one more time. And then it could pick up everybody sort of like last chance, gets back to Hudson by 1 o'clock with drop-offs to Payne and Chatham Manor. And then for those people who went from Hudson to Chatham, it would sort of be like their last call at around 1 o'clock to like get on the bus back to Hudson.
There's a tentative schedule right behind you on the screen.
And it integrates with the shopping shuttle also, right?
Yeah, there's a few opportunities to transfer either to the shopping shuttle or from the shopping shuttle.
Was Campbell overlooked or just not considered to be a necessary stop? Not Campbell, it is Campbell.
Yes.
I believe they have their own shuttle, but the mayor said they have expressed interest as well. So we'll make sure to reach back out to them.
And they have their own shuttle system already, but they may fill in some spots for them.
And the way that the transportation works in general is that the bus will start and stop anywhere along the route that is safe to start and stop. So
Okay.
there probably are some points on 66 that are not feasible
Right here.
just to stop, but there are many places on 66 that one could stop. So like, just because it's not marked on the route doesn't mean one couldn't stop there.
Correct. It can stop any place. They're called flag stops. So you can flag down the bus any place along these routes. The bus can pick up in a safe spot.
Yeah, and then the other policy that, as part of our accessibility policy, that's sort of like the recommended default, is that the bus, people can call in advance and request a 3/4 mile deviation. And so that's part of our accessibility policy. That is a pretty standard process. So if someone isn't able to walk to Depot Square, but they live a 1/4 mile away, they can call in advance and sort of get that thing. And that could also work for Camp Hill, that if they couldn't get to 66 on their own,
The bus can go in there.
they could call in advance and sort of make that.
And just the mechanics of that, where would they call? Is it a telephone call or a text message, or how does that
They
work?
would call our office.
Call your office, okay.
We have a veteran service already at the Kent Town Hall.
Mhm.
I think if this thing gets up, we can notify them. For the folks, I see they're getting dropped off and picked up by other vehicles.
Right.
So this could play in with them too. Not exactly sure where they're coming from, but I see the veterans car sits there and waits, and I see people are dropped off. So I think, trying this little pilot program, it could get bigger, and it could be something that turns in, especially reaching out of the way out to Canaan or
We don't want people going into Berkshire County spending their money.
I would much rather direct it to town. So the Ghent Town Hall, do you have, if people use, your town hall parking lot, they can leave vehicles there for a couple of hours? Okay. That's what we're gonna do in Canaan too.
There's limited parking up around the depot also, so.
What would be what are the steps to implement this quickly? I know you said you want to do it quickly, but without stress. What are those steps?
I think mechanically, like legally, I assume we need a resolution to accept the state funds. And I think we've already approved the bid. So I don't know if we actually need to approve the Chatham route, but it doesn't hurt to do it.
I think we'd still go to DOT and say, hey, we're starting this, just to let you know.
Yeah.
because You never know with them, what wrinkle they could throw into.
Right.
So,
We've never accepted the state funds?
We haven't gotten yet.
Oh, okay.
or yeah, I mean, I guess it's just a promise to reimburse. So like we haven't passed a resolution.
So what's the contract or something? Had to do
You don't
those
call it a
together.
grant, what do you call it?
I
I
don't
mean,
know.
you normally, we have a resolution to accept
like
a
a-
grant.
Like a memorandum.
Is this still gonna go through DOT or is it?
I
gonna
think
be a
it's-
it's not gonna be a DASNY?
No, I think it's the same. It'll be the same thing. That's my understanding. So,
That's better.
so I assume that, I mean, I guess I felt like we both needed just to go like, yes, we're doing this. And I'm not sure if legally we need to do resolutions, but it doesn't, I guess I'm open to whatever we want to do, but it seems like we might want to say we will accept the funds and direct them towards this project, whether those are two resolutions or
We
one.
need to do one just because we have to amend the budget to account for this at least. And
And then, so I think like that's a decision point. And then I think practically, it sounds like you had said like you need a 2-week notice, Mike.
I think a 2-week notice would be helpful, really and realistic for us.
Right.
So that we can get it out, because the Tuesday, the best reason I suggest is the Tuesdays and the Friday. The Tuesday, we were always, a year or so ago, we took away the Tuesday. We used to go to Germantown, and that was ridiculous. We just took that away. So the Tuesdays and Friday, we don't have another one, so that they were open.
Yeah.
Perfect. So we have the accommodations there, and we have a backup for it. So if something were to happen, we have another driver, another bus available for those 2 days. So there's backup plans for it. The biggest thing that, just thinking outside the box of what to make this thing work, seeing what we've done for all these years now, I think 13 years on the other side, I can't stress enough for anything like this to work. Chatham is going to be a great avenue if you get the word out. And Chatham being what Chatham is, knowing Chatham as well, how do you do that? You get it out. Well, word of mouth is great in Chatham. Everything, it goes like wildfire. And because Chatham being Main Street and Chatham, like it is, and Ghent, the more you can get it out, the better it's going to be. And once they start seeing the bus up and down the street, is going to be better. And I even think the fact that my suggestion of the 2 weeks, honestly, is I'm going to start sending the bus up and down there for a couple trips, just to start seeing the bus up and down Main Street.
Okay, great.
If you just do that a few days, we're not going to be making stops, but all of a sudden you're going to see it. You know, people are going to start talking about it. There's a bus.
So will the bus be marked?
Yes, the bus is,
How
the
is
bus
it
is Columbia County around the side. Our
Okay.
name's on the side. It's white, and it's going to start to be seen, because there's never a Columbia County bus in Ghent and Chatham. So
And is there something on the front that says like, that gives them the
there's signs on top that are lettered. So I'll have I have to have the dealer come back down and they'll program that so that we can change it. So they'll say Chatham or
Right.
Hudson or whatever like that, so that it'll be identified.
right? Because we also don't want confusion. 'Cause
Correct.
We don't want people to get on the
Correct.
shopping shuttle or like.
Correct,
get on
right,
the wrong-
exactly. If you see the ones around here that's running up and down Warren Street, stuff like that, it'll say shopping shuttle.
Yeah.
Or the ones going up to Albany, it'll say Albany shuttle or something like that. So that'll be identified.
I think we wouldn't want to go any faster than 2 weeks for the reasons that you're just like, so 2 weeks sounds great. 'Cause I guess the promotional things that we have ready, or like that we will have ready, is that, we'll have printed brochures in the same way we have for the shopping
Yes.
shuttle. We'll have one for Chatham.
Yes.
We'll have like a flyer that's just like a one-page version of that we can pass around.
Yeah.
I assume that sort of like the supervisors and the mayor will do a lot to sort of notify people.
Right.
And then we'll do sort of like a press release and those kinds of things. So I think we have some materials, and if you all want, like, we have signs around Hudson, like at the stops that we also, like, our highway department can put those signs together. So there's some like basic things that we can do to sort of get the word out.
And I just came from a meeting with Pastor Kim.
Mhm.
She's delighted to promote it through.
Right,
her-
get into the
her
church.
page and everything,
Right.
And my sister goes to the Catholic church up there, and then there's a lot of people up there. Get
Yeah.
the word out. I mean, it'll start. My concern, the only concern I may have, and maybe not, but is the county buses only have so many positions for wheelchairs. Thinking of the GAT facility there, whatever. If maybe I'm thinking too much, but that is a concern.
So that may be a phone call,
Yeah,
just to know what.
just to
your
know.
members'
Yeah, because I think
Ridership.
I'm trying to think the most we can take is 4 wheelchairs at one time.
So what's the capacity of this bus? Is it
Most
12?
most of the buses, no, the bigger ones are 24.
Okay.
That's what
And
they're
that's,
saying.
that's 4 wheelchairs on the 24?
Four wheelchairs plus, it'll be like a 20 plus 4 wheelchairs.
Just get rid of this
Otherwise,
back.
if there's no wheelchairs, it'll be 20.
The same route, just don't.
So that's gonna be the normal bus that would be taking her out?
Correct.
And you were saying earlier that you had a backup, for both days. That's
Yeah.
required by DOT, right? You have a
Yeah.
backup? Okay.
The county owns 5 buses themselves, and then I have a backup myself. I'm required to have up to 6 buses.
And no other demands on either of those 2 days?
No.
Okay.
This be linked.
Just in morning, the buses are, well, I shouldn't say that, you're right. One bus is always here in Hudson doing the shuttle, so that takes that out. The reason, excuse me, to bring us speed, the reason that we do this, as Mike had said, the 9 to 2, is because it allows us, those are the times of days that the other buses are not running. Before that, from 6 a.m. to 8:30, 8:40, the Albany, 2 of the buses run to Albany, the Albany shuttles. So those buses are taking the workers, state workers to Albany, and then we start in the afternoon at 2 o'clock. The first bus starts running to Albany, and the second bus starts at 3. So
That divides
4.
the window.
So that's the windows of opportunity. The problem since COVID was, which you can see, no matter what you're driving, if it's yellow or white, school bus drivers, coach drivers, bus drivers are few and far between. That's the dilemma we have of we're trying to fit everything into this window without putting more drivers on, because I don't want to try to say we can and we can't. So we're trying to put all this stuff to get everything we can do, accommodate in the window. We can do this in that window without a problem. Going outside that window, that's when I don't want to tell you we can do something and we can't do something.
Mhm.
That's why we're right now.
Weather conditions play. a role in
Yes.
this?
Weather conditions, then we keep in touch. Rick and I are always speaking, and the county has the authority, when we talk, we can cancel it. A lot of times if we cancel it, and I think even we can do this, we can go to the next day and cancel from a Tuesday to a Wednesday. I can pull a different driver in and probably do that without a problem. If it was Friday, then we would go probably to Monday then. We would change that to the.
Just to be clear, my job is, only to wake Mike up.
Oh, no problem. No problem. That's right. You and I talk about it.
So the county has like emergency alert system, and so we basically have, it's sort of like a list within the emergency alert system. So when you sign up for emergency alerts, you can be like, I want which kind of alerts, like highway or various things. And so one of the boxes you can check is public transportation.
Right.
And so basically we can send out, using the emergency alert system, just to the public transportation subscribers. So people can sign up for email or their phone, and then you just get this phone call.
I was just thinking ahead if people started getting
Yes.
dropped off at the town hall and they weren't
Yeah.
informed or something.
Right.
What we were gonna,
Yep.
how we could handle that.
Yeah.
We used
It's
to-
actually New York alert.
Oh, right, yeah.
Yep, exactly.
We're also next month, presenting a resolution to purchase a busware app. So the riders will be able to look on an app and track the bus on the app, and we can send out messages on that
Nice.
as well.
Yeah.
Cool.
Would any delays coincide with school delays? That's what we use for our senior lunch program. If there's a school delay or cancellation, then we don't have lunch.
That's kind of, it depends because like this would go through 3 districts. So 3 school districts. So it's kind of difficult to do that way.
And as you know, sometimes the weather's different, Hudson and Kane.
Right, exactly. Yeah, so we really don't do that.
Also, the schools,
It's a
like,
instrument.
I think the schools have, because when you're going to school, you could be on any road in the
Yeah.
district,
Yeah.
but like the transportation tends to ride on the,
Major.
yeah, like on the roads that
On
are
the
best
major,
plowed. So there are certainly conditions where like someone, like people in the district wouldn't be able to drive, but like the bus could be able to drive. So I think we certainly prioritize safety, but there's just, I think there's different safety conditions for the school district at large
I
versus.
was just trying to qualify a system that's already in place
Yeah.
rather than adding a second. But I think that New York, most of our seniors are signing up for New York Alert now, so.
And I think, yeah, I think in some ways we also just trust Mike's judgment.
Right. He's the one that's putting drivers out there.
Big shoulders.
So what you need today is, we need, if we want to move ahead with this, we need to develop a resolution out of here that would go to finance next week and full board.
Finances this week.
Finance tomorrow, right? Yeah, okay, that's right. Sorry about that, yeah. So where are we timing wise? That's what I was trying to figure out. I mean, I hear Jim wants to do a resolution for the fund to accept the money and then begin to
Should we have a
DOT.
special
I
before
don't
full
have that yet,
board?
so I wouldn't.
Well, how fast are you looking at? I mean, the state budget hasn't passed till.
It don't get past April 1st, right? So I think.
Yeah, we don't think so, but you know, you never know. That's the rule, but.
Well, what's the rush at this point?
I guess if
If we don't know if we have the funding.
Well, if I wouldn't want to wait till May 15th if we thought we could get the funding earlier than that.
I don't think there's any harm in doing a resolution, say it's pending, you know. pending state something.
I agree.
Yeah.
Are we, so are we charging $1 for this route?
Yes, I think with just for
So,
consistency.
Is what we submit, I mean, we might not want to initially, maybe it's like a,
That's true.
because what we get reimbursed from state would probably have to subtract that $1 from it. So to get interest, we could do it for free for the first whatever. And
That's a good idea.
that would increase our reimbursement and it would be the same to us.
Right.
Yeah, we are basically calling it a trial or a pilot
Yeah.
type program, so.
Jim, are you moving into marketing?
We're gonna get the money one way or the other.
Right.
Eventually, I'd put them there.
And we're gonna have a hard time spending down to 200, I think,
No,
right a year.
no.
So this
Yeah.
would- this would help that,
That's a good idea.
as long as we make them aware that it's.
It is a pilot, right.
Yeah. We could ask for optional donations for another cause.
Yeah.
Can of food for the veterans.
Yeah.
Well, the OFA has suggested,
Oh, yeah.
donations for, and it's usually what, 1/4, 1/5?
Yeah,
Or legal consultation, 1/100.
Yeah. Transportation, I think, is $3.
But to your point, if we want to spend down the 200 as quickly as we can, having an extra month of operations, we don't.
Yeah, well, so why don't we,
Do you know how many miles this is? Is that like the 8,900 a year? Is that still the right number?
Did you have this
yeah, what did I put?
10,296?
10,000? Okay.
Yeah, so this, I think like the mileage itself is a pretty small
So
portion.
that's
of what it
like
does.
55 grand. So John's been.
Right.
It was 535.
What was that? Did you have mileage on this?
Yeah.
It's in the-
It's got 10,000.
10,298, 11.
Times that by 535. You could do it on yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks.
All can.
You
I've seen
could
them.
just do
I
like
can, yeah.
11,000 for people that might be making that quarter mile side,
Yeah.
rounded up to 11.
But so the 200,000 is is more than we need for 1 year. I mean, my hope was that the 200,000 would be like a 2 or 3 year service, but that's all the more reason if we can get the new Lebanon extension covered, it's sort of like we have funds. We'll put some of it towards the vehicle. If we can bill internally for our time. So I think it behooves us to come up with ways to spend down the money. But so I guess could we have a resolution that approves, state funding and launching this program pending like confirmation that the state will cover it? And then we can, I guess for safety reasons, could we pass it tomorrow at finance and then we could determine whether or not we have a special county government before the full board?
Why don't you just do both?
Just do both? Okay. Yeah.
Why put it in tomorrow and
Yeah.
then
Okay.
work backwards, start with your county government and then we'll just have a special county government, special finance.
We
the
can
ninth of
talk
April,
about it
so-
at both those, or well, we won't.
By then you'll have an idea when the state budget might get passed, maybe,
Right.
but.
Yeah.
maybe not.
And then. give
So
it
we're
time to
projecting
get it out.
June this year.
Right, yeah, I know.
Oh, wow.
But that starts your 2-week clock, right? Your 2-week notice to Mike is when the state budget passes.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
That used to be a regular occurrence, June.
You're like,
I think if we pass, well, yeah, no, we don't know if we're gonna get it, so yeah, it's hard to tell. I would say if we approved it, we could give Mike that heads up, but if we're not gonna have the funding, we're gonna make it contingent on the funding, so. You gotta wait on the state to look at.
yeah, I mean, they keep saying it's very likely, but you never know. I guess I'm hesitant to get out,
It
get too
doesn't
far in
sound-
front of it.
Far-fetched at all, but it's the
Yes.
state budget things as they are, you never know.
At least it's in the one house and the governor's budget.
Yes.
That's the most positive sign.
They may all of a sudden realize 12% increase is not viable in the future. Cut something off, you never know. So, we'll see.
Did you call for a motion?
Yeah, let's have can I have a motion?
I'll make that
Okay.
second.
All in favor?
No, wait,
Aye.
Craig's on the committee.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Yeah.
It's gotta
I'll
be a
make the
committee
motion.
member.
Or this was sub.
Yeah. so- Do you want to second it?
I think you just submitted your
He's
application.
got
Yeah, right.
Well, Matt made it.
So Rick's gonna second it. Okay. People on the committee, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, motion passes. And then, so this could get launched as early as April 15th. It sounds like if the budget is delayed, it'll get launched later. So I'd say that in the meantime, we have some chances to like adjust the schedule and sort of like, but I'll just keep moving forward. So feel free
I
to
think
reach
you
out.
better
if we have
roll it out and
questions.
try it. I mean, this is a
Yeah.
good,
Yes.
good a starting point as any. And I think as Mike says, once you get the message out there that this is happening, people may say, hey, I want to go here or there, but that'll
Yeah.
develop.
Yes.
So
Did the survey identify any points of interest that people would like to go to using this route?
Nothing really stood out. It was a pretty big, like, I think we had like, where do you want to go? And people often just mention towns, or we had what purposes. And for the purposes, we're kind of like, we're also pretty diverse in terms of, there was a fair amount of like medical and shopping were the things that sort of lifted the most. But then some people also said stuff like recreation. So there wasn't a lot of route planning that in some ways is different than this. And then like, I think very few people mentioned stuff like DSS, but I just assumed that we would want DSS on there. And internally, a lot, like Bob has talked about wanting to sort of have people who use DSS be able to get there. And then I figured it made sense to add going all the way to the end of Warren, especially if 11 Warren is going to be one of our county buildings. There's just people that have access there. And a lot of people just said stuff like shopping, which I guess would include the whole run of Warren Street. So that was sort of my thinking around it.
One thing, if I could.
Yes.
I'm just sitting here thinking, with this, the way you're planning on running this, and I'm just thinking out loud.
Yeah.
So what you're gonna do differently with this run that you're not doing with the other county runs.
Right.
Is you're going to loop it.
Yes.
The other county runs for 30 years, you haven't looped it. You technically go to Copay area, you make one pickup, you bring them into town, you go around, you take them back. What I've seen over the past 20-some years of watching this is that, a lot of times you get the same people, and they get older, they aren't able to ride anymore. The ridership goes down. You don't get a lot of new riders on, or whatever, you get a couple or whatever, so the ridership doesn't really flourish. Maybe this will hopefully flourish. If you have a shorter period turnaround time and you do it again, that always was a challenge, because people wouldn't want to stay on the bus for the longest time. You know, now you're staying, you're not going out and coming right back. It wouldn't coincide well with doctor's appointments. It wouldn't coincide well with other opportunities. So all the times I think about, I've been doing this now 38 years, and every opportunity I've sat around a table talking about transportation in the county has been the same thing. We've had conversations where we need transportation, we need this, we need that, and everybody's had a great idea. Everybody's come to the table with a lot of concerns, but it's always come down to either funds and opportunities, and it's never been right. It's never done this.
Yeah.
It's never been able to hold me. How many times you've been in the same conversation, being mayor, we've never been able to make that right adjustment for the people. Being such a small, diverse county, where people move in here and they expect, coming from larger cities or something, a consistent run. The shopping shuttle is always running in the city, so they can always get in. You may have 4 people on it, or you may have 14 people on it, but the bus always runs consistently. Doesn't matter. Outside of the city of Hudson, you don't have that. So
We have it here though, right?
here, this will be. So I'll be very interested to see what this does. If it's going to succeed better than what we've done in the past. I don't know. I'm anxious to see what this does.
I do think that our county could be potentially increasing seniors that are more used to, public transportation. I think in the past, people didn't want public transportation, they wanted Uber service.
Right. And that's what another point I'm trying to get at is everybody wants, just like you get 40 people to say, I want this. They want car service. They
Yeah,
want
we heard
taxi
that,
service. They
you
want
know.
it now, but not a bus service.
When we did our plan, that Michael did, and we had a public hearing, that was a lot of messages we
Yeah.
had there was people wanted Uber service at their command.
Yes.
I want to be able to call and have public transportation take me wherever I want to go, whenever I want to go, and that's never going to happen.
But you know, we introduced this concept at our congregate meal site. We had about 14 to 16 people there. The first thing they thought about, we can go to Chatham for lunch. You know, and so for them, it was not just about going to the Price Chopper or to the pharmacy. It was about getting on the bus with a pal and
Sure.
having social, making an afternoon of so, errands and lunch or something.
Right.
So I'm hoping that's the market.
Exactly. The problem is, how long are they gonna stay at lunch and what time they gotta get done and get back on the bus
Well,
and
that's
leave?
why we're
That's the
working on this.
difficult problem. Green County hooked up with Ulster County, and Ulster County has a contract, and they have like 15 buses, which was great. So they have this contract, and they run these 15 buses all over Hell's Creation, and all of a sudden, nobody's on buses. If you see them, they're coming across with 1 person, 2 people, 3 people. They got 15, 18 buses going all over with nobody on them.
So what's the haul?
I don't know. I don't know that answer. I'm just
Right.
saying, I don't know.
Well, we
I'm
did
anxious to
talk,
see this.
we did talk a lot the other day about, since we are treating it like a pilot, really making sure that like we're collecting data and evaluating
Yeah.
the utilization, just making sure it's
Yeah.
a worthwhile expenditure, right?
Yeah.
Because I mean, I think the assumption is that eventually the county would have to absorb the expense.
Right.
And so we want to make sure that's
Right.
really
Right.
worthwhile.
That was gonna be my question. In the next budget cycle, when the $200,000.
Right, yeah. And it's your time, you know?
Yeah.
Right.
This is why the state puts pilot programs out there.
Oh, absolutely.
But there are a couple stops on here, Chatham Manor being one where there's good density, and I think you'll see a lot of the people take advantage of this service.
I'm just saying that $1 a person is not. gonna
I'm
be
sure all these
expensive.
supervisors will chip in.
Yeah. We charge back in towns. I like that idea.
I mean,
Like Hudson Greenport run, you know?
Nice service should be chipping in.
conceptually, like we used to do this Germantown run on Tuesdays that we took it out because there wasn't interest.
Right.
So in some ways, I think it's like the hard part will, if this is overwhelmingly popular, it's a good value for the county to continue. I think the hard part will be is that, and if it's not popular at all, it'll be easy to cancel. I think the question will be is that if it's, where exactly is that decision point? I mean, ultimately, when the state no longer funds, if the state is no longer giving us the special funds, it's still eligible for STOA. So we still get some state reimbursements. The mileage rate is much cheaper than our extended service hours. So it's like, I actually think this program is more viable long-term. And if Bob is able to establish that we're getting some sort of county savings elsewhere. So I think those are questions, but I think like you said, the total output is 55,000 for 2 days a week service. That's what you're saying?
At that 10,000.
So if we cut it down to one, if it was not that popular, we cut it down to 1 day. So I guess I'm like there, it seems like it's potentially long-term viable and some of that funding would come out of STOA funding. So I guess it's not nearly as costly as the extended hours. So it does seem like easier to maintain if we actually get significant ridership.
Plus by then, Mike will reduce his rate anyway, so.
Yeah. Prices are going down.
And it's my hope that the state will continue. The state has expressed interest in like investing more into this. This is like a first step. So if we don't spend all the money, can we get an extension? But also like, what would it mean for us to either join CDTA? There's been talks of like a Hudson Valley version of CDTA. So I also think there's like more structural issues around like, we would be better off with a regional transportation authority rather than us running it ourselves. So like, if we can show interest, maybe the state will partner with us on that next step.
And I also think that this is a plank in the New York State Office of the Aging in terms of providing regional transportation for seniors, so we might be able to find some support in there as well.
The master plan on aging.
Yeah.
So I'm good with the idea of running the Chatham run. I'm still a little confused on how you're gonna try and accomplish the New Lebanon, Canaan route.
That's another group.
That's another group, another conversation? Okay, I didn't know if we were trying to
I can give some highlights, and I think
authorize that today or not.
I think we're not ready to authorize it, but I can give
Okay.
you that. So Claire has been sort of researching what would it mean for healthcare consortium to sort of
Right.
use their vehicles and drivers to do this. So I think there's one piece is that like, is healthcare consortium like capable of doing this, and is that the direction we want to go in? And then what does that mean in terms of like contracting or procurement?
Right. Yeah.
So there's that batch, and then there's the related piece, which is like how would we pay for it? And I don't know, there's a 50% chance that these state funds could go towards that.
Mhm.
And if it does, I think that makes it, in my mind, an easy sell to be like, we have funds, let's try it out, let's do this.
Right.
If it doesn't, then I think we have some sort of value question, which is Bob has some preventative funds that are available. Could we put towards that? Could we save money with drivers? So I think there's like the financial component, and then there's the logistics component. So those are sort of running in parallel. If it works, it's great to provide that service, and it'll be feed drivers into this service. So we'll have all the more riders going from Chatham to Hudson if that program is on. So that's sort of the snapshot.
Okay.
We're not in a
Okay,
decision
I
today.
just didn't know how we were gonna try and incorporate that.
Yeah.
But not yet.
Did you have anything you wanted to add?
I think you summarized it well. I mean, we're very interested in providing that service. Whether we can or not really hinges on what kind of requirements would accompany the funding stream.
Right.
So like if the funding goes through DOT and that makes us subject to DOT regs,
Right.
there's no way
Yeah.
I can adapt the model
Right.
to meet that. Right now I'm running small enough vehicles that the vehicles are not subject to DOT inspection. The
Sure.
drivers do not have to have
Yeah.
a CDL, Class C. They don't need physicals, all that jazz. So it really, if the funding is flexible enough to accommodate
Mhm.
our vehicle and driver model, then we would be very interested in doing it.
Have you put together a price yet of what it would cost if the county, and wherever the funding, well, say it wasn't tied to DOT funds, you know, is there a cost of what you could provide that service to the county?
Yeah, so I haven't budgeted out yet, but I
Okay,
can do
all right.
that. And, you know, I sort of feel like we're very happy to just help noodle through it, even if we don't, you know, continue to be the provider. So that's another thing that I can do and just sort of hand over and say, this is what it looks like if I get it. The one thing,
Possibly do anything you can and just pay for it.
We absolutely, we have so much.
I know.
Yes. But there is a question.
No, but I'm just
about
saying,
the
it's easier,
GSS.
and to your point, I think if you tried to use the New York State DOT funds, it's gonna be prohibitive.
That may be true, yeah. I think, and there is a question
I don't
about-
think it sounds like a huge price tag, you know, but.
Right, right.
It-
And then the other thing that's interesting that came up when we met is so much of the potential savings to the county come in sort of making the transfer of clients from the travel lodge to DSS more efficient. And so that sort of makes me wonder
Right.
whether we shouldn't be talking about a dedicated shuttle for that. So there's some questions out there for Bob.
Okay.
And it's great to hear, Craig, that you had already been in conversation with him. So I'm trying to follow up with him and figure out like, what's the best way to
Sure.
skin that cat?
Okay.
If that's the nut of the problem we're trying
Yeah.
to solve.
We have done a draft route though, so that will help with pricing.
Okay.
Yes.
And I'd just like to know what the numbers are.
I can do that next.
Thank you.
Kistria?
Yeah, I just first wanted to thank Michael for all of the hard work on this. I know it hasn't been easy, and I appreciate you including New Lebanon and Canaan. And I think that if we can do the New Lebanon route with the DOT funding, that seems like, you know, we have this 200,000. The Chatham route's not going to take it all. You know, it seems like a natural extension. I like Ron's idea. If we can't, that, you know, potentially we use some county or DSS or other funds. But my question, Michael, is how long do you think before we have an answer on that? Has it been kind of difficult to get the details on the funding and what we can use it for?
It has been difficult. So I feel like my experience with DOT is that it's a little unpredictable in terms of how they function on the timeline. I think this funding batch is particularly challenging for DOT because it comes from a member item. So there's like the rules are somewhat vague. So there's a little bit of like DOT feels like it's answering to the Office of Budget Management? Was that what it's called? So like the Office of Budget and Management is actually the decider for what is eligible. And then the Office of Budget and Management is like reading, it's sort of, the member item is just like 1 or 2 sentences long. So there's not a real clear like legal method. So there's a little bit of like DOT is deferring to the Office of Budget and Management. The Office of Budget and Management is deferring to the Assembly member and the Senator, who are that like, so there's a little bit of chain of like, no one's really in charge. And now we're sort of in this in-between zone where like the language itself could actually be changed between now and the time the budget is solved. So I guess I'm just doing my best to keep it moving, but I really have no idea like how complicated this is. And I can just report back that last summer it was announced that we had the funding. And by the time that we had a blueprint for how to spend the funding, they were also telling us that our funding had expired.
Right.
So,
Typical
like,
states,
if that's my experience on this process. That's hard to know what the next year will unfold.
Yeah. And I wonder if, you know, we can get the budget numbers and the plan. And like Claire said, when Brenda and myself and Claire met, it might even be 2 different models.
We
One
lost
which
you.
is- Oh, can you hear me?
Yeah, I hear you.
Hello?
Oh yeah, you're back. You
Oh,
like lost. 90%.
Sorry. Like Claire was mentioning in our meeting with Brenda and Claire and myself, you know, it came that maybe it makes sense to have 2 different models. One is just the shuttle, you know, to DSS, and the other is more of a public transportation route. But it sounds like once we get some definition and budget numbers, like you said, Ron, you know, maybe we can come to this committee and similar to the resolution passed today, which is, you know, pending the funding being approved, you know, we can do some resolution that's pending this being able to be paid for with the funding. You know, this is our plan. And then alternatively, look at funding within the county, within DSS and other places, because I do think there's a cost savings compared to what we're doing right now, which is individual drivers going out on a pretty regular basis. And then, you know, have it kind of open-ended so that if the DOT funding comes through and says, yes, it can also cover this, we're ready to go. And if not, then, you know, we have a backup method.
So there's a pretty strong parallel with this and the USDA broadband funding for the 3 towns that were, and no one wanted to take ownership. It was a member item and no one wanted to take ownership. And somehow we eventually got USDA to take the ownership, which is when the ball started to move. And that was through our legislators. Could we work with our legislators to see if we can just get it into that channel or into that groove and maybe avoid the same learning curve that we had associated with the broadband funding? And my other question is, if we're preparing this for launch, and I'm going to be the optimist and say, I hope we have a budget by the first week in April. Who does the publicity? Who does the press release, the posters, the brochure, the flyer? How do we line that up? Is there a staff person that does? I mean, this is the transportation committee, so I'm assuming that's not within your purview, but it might, I don't know.
In the past, it was like I've led those processes, and then we have Don in planning has done a lot of like the mapping, and I think it was Don who did the brochure, and then Trevor in the highway department would use Don's map to make the signs.
So
So
does Michael need to be authorized to move ahead with that part of the process as well, or?
I would say once the resolution passes, yeah.
Okay, just want to make sure that piece is in place.
Thanks.
And I don't think we can even talk to Michelle or Dee Dee until the budget's done because they're just working around the clock.
I mean,
I did pressure Gunner. Who was optimistic.
Yes.
Right.
Well, it depends on what news report you've heard or what newsletter you've read as to whether or not it's going to be the 1st, the 15th, we never.
Yeah, right.
So,
No chance.
well, the governor says she's working round the clock.
I talked to the staffer
This morning.
last
What does
night.
that mean for her?
Yeah, we're signing this, yeah, right, yeah.
That's what she said this morning. I'm just reporting what I heard. And I also want to thank you, Michael, because I know it's a tremendous amount of work. Thank you.
Appreciate you saying that. Happy to be on the team.
But you quit.
He's
exhausted.
for 8 months.
Yeah. We tired him out.
He wants to be here long enough to see the results.
That's right.
So let's get
Yeah.
started.
Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Hey.
All opposed? Thanks. What do you got?
Thank you, sir.